What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we are going to be breaking down Mel Kiper's first 2025 NFL mock draft. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. We're on a meteoric rise. We've grown over 1,000 subscribers in the past 28 days alone. Thank you guys so much for that. I am so excited. I bring content like this every single day. Below my face is my board. I do not create a unique board to just be unique. I owe you guys honesty, and even if I'm wrong, I'm willing to be honest with you and transparent about it. I can't move guys up and down based on whether I feel a certain way. It's actually based on my all 22 grades that I post clips of over on my X page. It's perfectly free for you guys to join. Go to the link tree. It makes it a lot easier. You don't even have to worry about knowing the username 2 clicks away from being able to see that. And I've been posting a lot because it gives you sneak peeks into seeing the videos I'm going to be creating and the thought process behind why I might be super high on certain guys and maybe not so much on others. Let's get into this though. Super excited for this. And Mel Kiper's the GOAT. Super excited for it. For those of you guys who've been watching, I've been wearing jerseys pretty much every episode, and that's kind of going to be my new thing because I just fell in love with college football jerseys. Originally, I wanted a Micah Parsons one, and that was my first one, Micah Parsons, Penn State. And then I just got Jamar Chase, LSU, and then I've just been adding to the list, and I've been a little fiscally irresponsible, but we got an Alvin Kamara jersey from Tennessee. I was actually so excited for this. In the future, I will be planning on getting a Peyton Manning one as well, but let's get into this. Let's have a great time, starting out with the number 1 overall pick from the guy who pretty much started the love for the draft himself. And just because, I know a lot of people have a negative opinion of Mel Kiper, and you know what? I respect the balls on this guy. He might not be right, even maybe 50% of the time, which he's more right than 50% of the time. But let's just even assume it's the worst, and he's right 50% of the time on his valuations. He is honest, and I love that. I mean, that is something that is more valuable than somebody who just parrots other people's stuff and ends up getting it right 90% of the time. I could give a rat's ass. There's a place in this world for those people, and it allows us to have a better view on certain prospects. But if you have the balls to be completely honest, and especially if you're in the comments section, be completely honest. Don't do it just to get reaction and stuff, because I hate people who do that. But Mel Kiper doesn't do it for reactions. He does it because he genuinely believes what he sees. And I have a ton of respect for that. Even if he's not 100% right 100% of the time, I still love the fact that he's willing to be himself. And, he's continuously been right about certain prospects that people will say he's wrong about. So, at the end of the day, as long as he will never get credit for what he does right outside of the Indianapolis Colts, I think, quarterback pick that, ended up making him. But outside of that, people just being right when you're against the consensus is not rewarding in this industry. I understand why people parrot a lot of opinions. But I know it because I try my best to be completely honest, even though I do disagree a lot of times. But at the same time, I want to give credit to those who actually do have a high level of authenticity, and I really do think Mel does. Tennessee going Cam Ward at number 1. It is very, very, very possible. The new GM ended up saying, hey, there are 2 things he said. First off, he is willing to listen to trade offers, but he ended up actually saying, if we're going to be taking a generational player at number 1, he says, if there's a generational player there, we're taking him. To me, that is 2 different potential targets. Technically Cam Ward could be the quarterback that they're looking for, but I also think that we're neglecting the fact that maybe these quarterbacks are going to slip. Does anybody think that they're better than Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Caleb Williams? The answer is no. And there's only so much room in the top 10. And if you're drafting a, top 20 quarterback at number 1, you might start, doubting whether it's worth the number 1 overall pick. But at the same time, that's not the point I'm trying to make. I do think it could be Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter is someone, as a pass rusher, could be viewed in that light. Maybe not as an edge rusher, but as a pass rusher, he might be up there with some of the best. And he's still developing. He's still growing. Obviously, I think the ceiling is far from capped. But then also Travis Hunter does have, if you can end up using him properly, some of the most freaky traits coming out of college. So I do think the Titans might be willing to pass on a quarterback there at number 1. I don't think that job insecurity for Brian Callahan can outweigh the amount of control that I think Mike Borgonzi is going to be able to have over this draft process. So just going to say the Titans actually might do the right thing and not force a quarterback pick. But if they do end up going Cam Ward, it is the style of quarterback that Mike Borgonzi has been used to in terms of the playmaker, big arm, and, just going to be a little bit more erratic. But if you hone it properly, like Andy Reid has, Mike Borgonzi might be right in taking Cam Ward at number 1. Number 2, the Browns go Travis. I respect it. If you think that he is a generational player, then, it certainly could be a massive asset. I do think that his best future is at corner. His most profitable one is at wide receiver. And my dream scenario is him being able to play a defensive back role. And I really do think he could be arguably the best safety in the NFL if he does end up doing that either early on or maybe even later in his career. But if you continue selecting great players, there's eventually a time where your team will be really, really solid. And I think filling need, like, I don't think Shedeur should be the number 2 overall pick. And technically, Shedeur is my number 1 QB. Again, it's not really a question of which one you want. It's what style of quarterback are you looking for? It's like you're not really going to be saying, this is my offense. Does Shedeur fit or does Cam Ward, like, which one is going to be better? Like, no, it's going to be like, what is my vision for my franchise quarterback? If it's going to be more Shedeur's archetype, then you go Shedeur. If it's going to be Cam Ward's archetype, you go with Cam. It's not really like you're saying, hey, one is definitively better than the other. In a system that you kind of just need a game manager, you're not going to want Cam Ward. But in a system where you really prioritize that playmaking ability, I do think that, you can end up really valuing, and technically speaking, a lot of the teams that are in the playoffs have playmaking quarterbacks. So you'll be certainly valuing that, which is why I think at number 1, it makes sense. The Giants go Shedeur Sanders at number 3. So this is pretty cookie cutter. Like, the Browns going after one of the best non-quarterbacks, and then the quarterbacks going at 1 and 3. I think, again, I'm going to see actually, because this is a live reaction, but I do think there we go. Time's running out and they have to get it right. So I do think that, talking about self-preservation moves there for Joe Shane as well as Brian Dable. Shedeur Sanders, I don't think, again, I'm not a big guy in the QB class, but at the same time, I think it's far more likely that the Giants take quarterback at 3 than any other team takes a quarterback in the top 5. Or even a trade up into the top 5, because not many coaches, GMs are truly on the hot seat, like especially combination wise, because I was talking about with the Titans. I mean, I believe there should be a little bit of a long leash there for Borgonzi, but for not many teams will have that combination of a GM and a coach that might get fired, and they need to have instant success. So they're going to take a worse player, air quotes, worse player for the team in the long run for having short-term success to keep their jobs. So that's why I think it's very, very, very likely. The question is, is it going to be Shedeur or is it going to be Cam? Because Cam, you might be able to have some early success and then pitch the, hey, Brian's worked with guys with arm talent before, and then try to keep that extended. But it's going to be an interesting conversation. New England goes Abdul Carter at number 4. Fantastic pass rusher. I would absolutely love to see him there on New England. Just certainly one of the best players in the class, undoubtedly. You just cannot use him. You cannot expect for him to be an every down impact, because I do think he's still learning how to play edge rusher at the NFL level as a defender for run defense. And I think he's worked really, really well as a pass rusher, and he's done better than I expected for him in run defense, but he still is very, very, very behind he's very behind like the where you're wanting the threshold for an every down edge rusher for the run defense category. Jacksonville going Mason Graham at number 5. I can see it, but I just don't think Balky's going to love the arm length. He's just somebody who's a really damn good player. He may be number 18 on my board, but he's somebody that, I mean, technically speaking, if we're going to be completely real here, if he had 1 point boosted, he'd be number 10. Like, it is that close of a group, and that's why you can't necessarily, like, say, hey, Mason Graham is, like, you can't complain about it here, because technically Mason Graham is going to be tied right now for, being a top 15 player. Like, it is what it is. I think Mason Graham's a very good defensive interior. I think he needs to be a defensive interior too to have the best success early on, but I could see that developmental curve with him continuing and him progressing into being well worth that top 5 selection. 6, we got the Vegas Raiders going T-Mac, Tetairoa McMillan. Perfectly fine with this one. I do understand if people want to push back and go after, Will Johnson perhaps, but because I'm pretty sure Ja'Cory Bennett has just had a pretty riddled injury history. You might want to have something a little more consistent there. That being said, Will Johnson did have pretty much a air quotes season-ending injury, so could be something that would be turning you off. But Tedro McMillan would be a great addition there. Essentially, would be your Devontae Adams air quotes on your squad. At number 7, you got the Jets going Mikael Williams. I could see it happening, like especially if you end up getting Glenn. I think that would be like one of his focuses is that defensive line and continuing to boost it and make it better. I don't know if it's fully going to end up working out that way, but Mikael is someone who is a fantastic athlete. And then the thing I love the most about him, because I was a Mikael Williams denier coming into the year, technically speaking, coming into evaluating him, I was a big fan, was let down, became a denier, and you could just watch, and unfortunately, it fed into my denial of him early on when he got that high ankle sprain, right? Like, he just wasn't healthy. And you can see as the season progressed, as his health improved, so did his play. So for me, whenever I see that, he's either learning or getting healthy or both. And regardless of it, it's more representative of how damn good he was at the end of the year versus how underwhelming it was in the middle to early part of the year. I think Mikael Williams did a fantastic job this year. If he goes top 10, I am not going to complain. The Jets are a team that you could be looking to upgrade outside of that edge 1 position or edge 2. And, I think there might be better routes for the Jets, but I'm not going to complain if they end up taking a player that they truly believe could be game changing. That extra 10 to 12 sacks could mean, it could be a bigger difference in impact than maybe going somewhere else. But I'd go offensive line personally if I could. I'm going to be like criticizing, but I also want to be able to provide some insight as well. You got the Panthers going Jalen Walker. It's going to be very similar to Frankie Louvu's role, a couple years ago. I guess technically like a year ago, but Jalen Walker is a fantastic player. I do love the fact that he is listed as a pure linebacker on this team. I'm curious what, he's going to be an interesting fit to where you can use him as an off ball and as an edge. So I would love to see the split as to what the reps would be if he goes to Evero. But, Jalen Walker, sometimes you just got to get the good players, man. I'm not going to complain too much. The Saints then go Will Johnson at 9. You might as well at this point, because if I'm not mistaken, Depot's also up for a contract too. So you can have not Xavier McKinney. I was about to say Xavier McKinney because I was thinking of Alabama, which God only knows why I would think of Alabama and then Xavier McKinney. But Kool-Aid McKinstry and Will Johnson as your primary boundaries going forward. It's a unique pick, but it's something that, hey, they did BPA at corner last year when we didn't think they need it. They could do it again this year. Will Campbell goes to the Bears at 10. I'm a little bit worried about his hip flexibility. I think that's why he has an interesting stance. And then I've seen him in 3-point. Does not look like he's used to being in 3-point stance at all. I would worry about him being in that guard role for that reason. However, I'm still going to be relatively optimistic about him. He's my 20th overall player on my board. Solid offensive lineman. I just end up liking a couple guys more. And I like the fact that you could potentially have him being the future there at tackle. Niners go Kelvin Banks at 11. I do worry about his overall speed, his foot speed. He's very, very, very slow. He might be in that 6'3" range because he's listed at 6'4", but we all know how these colleges like to fib us a little bit. They like to pull the tassels a little bit and get us to think that they're a little bit better in terms of statistical weight and height than they actually are, which I personally don't get. Like, you're the one who's deciding to start him or not. It's not going to make him more or less startable because of that. And regardless, Kelvin Banks, he's a very solid offensive lineman. I just am very, very, very much more on the low side for Kelvin Banks because I do worry about the foot speed. I worry about the leverage issues. And even as a guard, it's like, I don't really think he has the movement skills to be able to truly put it all together. But if he does, if he is beating that threshold, I do like the idea of him being able to play on the Niners and just be able to provide that extra power. But I do have a lot of offensive linemen that I have above him. You got the Cowboys going Luther Burden at 12. He's a very solid weapon. And I mean, he can even take running back reps if you really need him to. I personally don't like the potential of him on the boundary at sub 6 foot. I guess you can kick CD more out there than Luther, but I'm just not the biggest Luther guy as well. Again, that doesn't mean, I'm disagreeing with a lot of these picks, and that doesn't mean that they're wrong picks. It just is stuff that I personally wouldn't do, which is what I owe you, like being able to say why. It doesn't degrade what Mel's doing, because I also have probably a higher likelihood of being wrong than Mel is. But as we continue to mold, learn, and be honest with ourselves, we get to understand where we do things right and wrong. I personally don't think the Cowboys would be helped out by Luther Burden to the same, remotely the same degree as Ashton Jeanty. But it's at least it's unique and it's new, and Luther Burden would provide something to this offense that they do not have. I just also like some of the weapons there for the Cowboys in round 2 and 3. You got the Dolphins going Malachi Starks at 13. I respect it. Makes a lot of sense. Javon Holland, goodbye. Technically Jordan Porter too. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but at the same time, it just need and value matched up. I get it. Same thing with the Colts and Tyler Warren. If you want to, again, I was about to say, if you want to maximize AR, then you give him a reliable target and you have the offensive line in place. I think that the next best thing to help out a quarterback is having a relief option that is reliable, and Tyler Warren is exactly that. At 15, you got the Falcons going Shedeur Stewart. I personally have some issues with Shedeur. That's me. I'm on the Shedeur hater side, air quotes. But I think that if he goes with a really, really good mentor, I think in 2 to 3 years he can do fine. Like, Shedeur is a freak athlete, and it's cool to see that he can have some edge bend, but the guy is running 11 yards trying to get around what they call the hump. Like, as athletic as he is, I do not see him genuinely winning versus NFL level tackles at a consistent rate as a pass rusher. But he is going to be a freak, and I do like the fit of him in Atlanta because he's not just going to be some pure outside linebacker edge. He will be a legitimate defensive end, in my opinion. So, I don't like it in the first, but for teams that do have a longer leash, that do have a better situation, I can understand it. Again, there's not many guys who are built like Shedeur Stewart. So if you can end up really being able to actually tool him properly and have the right mentorship, you can end up getting yourself a nearly unblockable player at 290 with freak athleticism. And the potential will be very intriguing to a lot of teams. Not necessarily to me, but at the same time, which is funny enough because my job's not on the line if Shedeur Stewart does well or not on my team. But I just personally have my reservations. Tyler Booker goes at 16 to the Cardinals. Woo! That is interesting. He said he'd be a reach for James Pierce and then Scorton and Mike Green. That is, hey, you know what? Again, I'm not going to agree with it, but respect for the cojones to have the balls to say that. I certainly wouldn't because I really like James Pierce. I'm not the biggest Mike Green guy on planet Earth, but I still like him. And then I really like Nick Scorton. But that's certainly, if Ashton Jeanty's still here, I can guarantee you Denver might be trying to trade up and get him. There should be plenty I think the Steelers at that point, shit. Can you imagine Ashton Jeanty and Arthur Smith's offense? I'm just saying. This would be a trade down spot, but it's interesting that guard would be the move here. I personally would wait till round 2 or 3. Even though Tyler Booker is a fantastic player, I just know that there's going to be good interior talent based on the class that the tackles I've studied alone. They're going to be kicking to the interior. Based on arm length and just overall play style, I'd feel very comfortable in round 2 going that route. I would prefer to, air quotes, reach on one of these edge rushers. Again, I'm biased because I believe in those edge rushers, but, I prefer to go after, I honestly would go after Tyleik Williams at this point, but it is what it is. Tyler Booker, you're upgrading the offensive line. That's the thing. It's not a bad pick. It's just something that I personally would not do. Jahad Campbell goes to the Bengals at number 17. Very interesting. Lou is out of the building. So, maybe you guys can, deploy Campbell properly. But, it's certainly going to be interesting. Interesting to say the least. So, I'm curious what they're going to say. So, he does a little everything on this side of the ball. That I did not see him being listed potentially as a pure edge rusher on this team, which hurts my feelings. And I know that it says linebacker here, but I was really hoping it would say linebacker / edge. Because I think Jahad Campbell is ridiculous as an edge rusher. You guys know me. I'm a super fan of Jahad Campbell. You see him there at number 13 overall on my board. He could play linebacker and play it very well. He's one of my top linebackers in the class, no doubt. It's just I think of him as a legitimate edge rusher as a top 15 player in the class. And, that talent differential as a former number 1 edge in his high school class, to me, would give me, the desire to go after that route. Armand Membu goes to the Seahawks at number 18. I've done that myself. Really good run blocker. Needs to probably kick to the interior as well, and can end up filling in at tackle when need be. At number 19, we got the Bucs going Nick Emmanwori. Good to see him in here. I keep saying I want to find a place for him in the first and just never do. It's good to see that at least Nick gets that respect. He was my safety one coming into the year. I'm going to be continuing to reevaluate him, but right now he's technically still safety one, just not labeled as a pure defensive. Like, I have some guys labeled defensive back to get around the issue of him not being safety one. But regardless, Nick Emmanwori is one of the top defensive backs in the class, no doubt. Safety one coming into the year. Glad to see him still getting that love. Denver Broncos going Ashton Jeanty. Literally said it. So that's good to see. Again, this is a live reaction, so I'd like to be able to experience this live with you guys. It saves us both time, because for me, I'm not going to be boring being like, oh, what's later, and actually knowing. It's kind of fun to be able to experience it with you guys. And Ashton Jeanty to the Broncos was a move that I literally would have said moving up for would make sense. And of course, the terms of use ended up just absolutely shellacking our UI, but we're going to deal with it. Steelers go Emeka Egbuka at 21. 2006 was the last time we ended up taking a first. And I guess that's fair. The last time we did it, it ended up working well. And also, the receivers we keep drafting down the board usually are ones with not great personality. So maybe that's why they're slipping. If we get Emeka Egbuka, I'm not going to throw a massive fit. I just need to. I'll be very impatient to see how we handle our corner 2 position, defensive line, and just seeing how our quarterback situation also plays out. Not saying that's what we should do at 21 at all. But at the same time, I'm just very curious to see how that would work. Will we get Will Howard in the 3rd round? Because then you can get Emeka Egbuka with a quarterback that really liked to target him. It'd be interesting to see if we could game it that way. Chargers go Colston Loveland at 22. Makes sense. You're getting a reliable weapon there in a system that, it's pretty familiar there with Harbaugh. You got the Packers going Mike Green at 23. They need to increase their pass rush, and I would be very intrigued to see Mike Green on the Packers, because he's not like a lot of their edge rushers that they do have. Mike Green is going to be a very unique piece that could work really well with Jeff Hafley, using him like a Donovan Azurewaku. Vikings go Ben Morrison. I mean, if he comes out, you guys see exactly what his grade was pre-injury. That's what the pluses are for, is saying, hey, this is a grade before season-ending injury. So TBD. But I mean, I love him to death. We have 2 more days, and for him to continue stringing us along before we know if he's going to be viable. But if he is, the Vikings would be dumb to pass on him at 24. Texans go Josh Simmons at 25. I love him to death. Again, his grade at number 5 overall is pre-season ending injury. That's why I put the plus there, just so you guys understand, hey, this is before he ended up having that injury. I'm not going to BS about what the player he would be after the injury, because haven't seen him, don't know what the health is, don't know what the medicals are. And the Texans taking him and putting him to guard would be ridiculous. And then you could also potentially kick him out the tackle in the long run. That would be a freakishly amazing move. For the Rams going Josh Connerly, you see where he's at on my board at number 7 overall. I think this guy is fantastic. And, he's one of the few players that I really have faith in their re-anchor ability. I mean, you can knock him off his initial anchor, because he is 6'4", 315. It's sometimes not very easy when you see a 270-pound edge rusher get pop you, and then your feet have to reset. But his feet reset very, very well. There's a rep that I posted on my X of JT Tuimoloau literally lifting him off the ground, and he still somehow found a way to re-anchor. I thought that was phenomenal. It was great for both players. Honestly, thought JT should have disengaged and should have combined it with another move to be able to block shed. But regardless, really good rep for both the guys. Josh Connerly would be a great pick there for the Rams for the long run at left tackle. Ravens then go Siobhan Ravel. At this point, I mean, he looks good in purple and yellow, so I think he looked good in purple and gold there. But regardless, I mean, outside of that, Siobhan Ravel would be an upgrade. There is certainly going to be a role with Brandon Stevens, pony up. I mean, I can't really say that with a lot of confidence. Brandon Stevens has had a little bit of a rough tenured season there, but Siobhan Ravel is a solid corner. I just am not super high on a player that, first off, there's no all 22 of him from this year for me as an independent person to be able to watch him. But on top of that, the game that people love to reference happened almost 2 whole years ago. It kind of feels like Trey Lance all over again, where it's when he ended up getting drafted, he had one game that we saw, which it literally was only one game though, and he ended up throwing a couple of picks, but it's like we were referencing like a year and a half before when he got drafted, like as to why he'd be great. And I already have my potential concerns with him. I think Shavon Ravel was a solid corner in that game versus Michigan, but I do have my concerns. He's just one of those players that I like, but maybe don't love like the consensus does. Detroit Lions go James Pierce. I love it. I mean, again, James Pierce, my number 2 player in the class. Maybe I should be valuing frame a little bit better, like a little bit more. But I personally think James Pierce brings enough like physicality and technique to the table to get around it. Nick Gordon going to the Commanders at 29 is literally a dream. Fantastic move. Guys at 285 don't move consistently the way he does. Texas A&M just knows how to snipe the big dudes that just move like they're actually normal-sized edge rushers. The Bills then go Max Hairston. I know that Mel likes Max Hairston a lot. I think in a pure man coverage, like, or a heavy man coverage system, Hairston's going to do a perfectly fine job. And I mean, if you really believe in him, I think it's going to be perfectly reasonable. And I mean, again, he's been banged up. I think it's a reason why he showed a lot less physicality. His shoulder was not 100%. And so he did drop noticeably on my board. But he is a very, very solid cornerback. It's just, I think he's a little more scheme specific than what people like to say. Like, I'll just put it that way. Then we got the Chiefs going Walter Nolan. I love it. You guys know what I think of it. Walter Nolan's a great player. I'm not as high on him again as the consensus, but I think for Kansas City, I sure as hell would be. So, big fan of that. And then Philly going Kenneth Grant. At a certain point, I mean, you might as well. Like, you're sitting there, and I mean, I guess they're projecting Philly to win. But, like, I do think that if you're sitting there at 32, defensive interior is a legitimate position to think about. Milton Williams is, 70% snap rate? You're not going to be giving all that to Moro Ojomo. You'd love for that to go to Jordan Davis, but you haven't seen that growth this year. So you very well could say, hey, Kenneth, you have Jalen Carter to learn from that is going to be kind of like that guy who's a freak size, freak athlete who could be pretty much do everything. That's the ceiling for Kenneth Grant, right? Like, he's a freak athlete with a great motor and just hasn't fully put it all together. So, interesting curveball, but honestly, I don't disrespect it. I guess the Zero Walker would also be very fun for Philly, can actually thrive in cold weather climates as well. But regardless, this was a very fun, very unique mock draft that, I love seeing, because I know Mel's going to bring up some takes that are absolutely batshit crazy. But I feel like I kind of aspire to have that level of tenacity when I actually believe it, rather than actually just like forcing it. And I don't think Mel does this to get clicks. He gives a rat's ass. He's gotten enough money. At this point, he's just doing it because he loves the game. And so, very intriguing. We'll see what happens. But thank you for watching. I love you. See you on the far side. Peace.